Hey guys, welcome to week 2, day 1 of your poetry unit. I just want to say thank you, and I'm really proud of those of you who uploaded your poems from last week. A lot of them are really great, and I am impressed. I knew that I have a lot of creative students, and you guys are just proving me right these days. I hope that you are well. I hope that you are staying home and staying safe. And I just want to get started on the second week. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is you are going to open up the Google Slides presentation, which is in your Google Classroom assignments, and you will see materials and you will see an assignment. In the materials is the Google Slide presentation. I'm going to go through this. There are a couple of parts in this presentation that you are going to need to fill in on your assignment. So after I go through this, go into your assignment, open up the document, and then fill in any blanks that I'm going to talk about here. Okay, so let's get started. Hello and welcome. Week 2 remote learning. All right, this week. Okay, so last week we talked about couplets. Couplets are pretty much the most, one of the most simplistic forms of poetry that exists out there. And this week we're going to get a little bit more complicated and a little bit more complex. It's called, the type of poetry we're going to be talking about this week is called the Villanelle. Okay, the Villanelle is just another form of poetry. It's another way that people have written poetry before. All right. So a villanelle, and this is on your document. So ultimately you're going to need to fill in a couple of blanks. I'll show you that later. The villanelle is a highly structured poem made up of 5 3-line stanzas. Okay, so each chunk of the poem, there are going to be 5 chunks that are 3 lines long each. And then the last chunk is going to be a quatrain. A quatrain is just a stanza with 4 lines. So it's going to be 5 tercets or 3-line stanzas and 1 quatrain, which is a 4-line stanza. Okay, with 2 repeating rhymes and 2 refrains. That's just a fancy way of saying every other line kind of rhymes. I'll show you what that looks like here. I'll give you an example. Now, I know that this seems complicated. I know it seems much more complex than the couplet, and it is a lot more complicated than the couplet poem that we worked on last week, but I am going to break it down and you are going to practice with it more than once. So after the practice, I'm pretty sure you'll be fine with what the form looks like, okay? Okay, so here we go. And this is on your sheet, your assignment sheet as well. So if at any point you are completely lost or you don't want to follow along with this and you want to look at it on your assignment sheet, this is on there. Okay, so I'm going to read this poem aloud and then I'm going to break down what the structure of the poem is. Okay, this is Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. It's by Dylan Thomas. If you've ever seen the tattoos that I have on my arm, this is the poem that it is from. Okay. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men, near death, who see the blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my Father, there, on that sad height, curse, bless me now with the fierce tears, I pray, do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Okay, in this poem, first of all, Dylan Thomas wrote this poem at a time where his father was dying, and it can be assumed that he is writing this poem to his father when he says, "Do not go gentle into that good night, rage, rage against the dying of the light." He's essentially urging his dad to fight against death. Okay, and he goes through a list of different types of men, all of whom have lived their lives and are now facing the end, and they are all fighting against death, and he is encouraging his father to do the same, right? He talks about wise men, he talks about good men, wild men, and grave men, and sort of equalizes all of them. Death has a tendency to equalize all of us, right? It's something that all of us are going to experience in some time during our life, and he encourages his father to believe that this is not his time to go and that he should fight against it. So that's kind of the meaning or the context of the poem. Now I'm going to talk about the structure of the poem. Okay, so as we'll go through, you will notice that the first line of the poem and the third line of the poem are repeated throughout the poem, right? So the first line in the first stanza shows up again in the second stanza, and then again in the fourth stanza, and then again in the sixth stanza. All right, so this first line, "Do not go gentle into that good night," shows up again down here, and then it shows up again here, and then it shows up again here. You'll also notice that the third line of the first stanza shows up in other stanzas as well. "Rage, rage against the dying of the light" shows up again down here, shows up again down here, and then shows up again down at the bottom. All right, and the way they show up is in alternating order. So in the second stanza, the first line shows up. In the third stanza, the third line shows up. In the fourth stanza, the first line shows up. In the fifth stanza, the third line shows up. And then in the sixth stanza, which has 4 lines, both line 1 and line 3 show up. Also notice the rhyme scheme. The rhyme scheme is over here on the left-hand side, A, B, A, A, B, A, A, B, A. So you'll notice that all of the stanzas, except for the last one, are A, B, A. Whenever I say A, B, A, it means all of the lines labeled with an A rhyme with each other, and all of the lines labeled with a B rhyme with each other. Down in the last stanza, it's almost the same. It's A, B, A, A. So the last 2 lines rhyme with each other. Okay? Now, I have labeled this like this because I want you to do the same thing with another poem. And I'm going to show you how to do that in just a minute. So on your assignment sheet, you're going to label the poem "A Mad Girl's Love Song" by Sylvia Plath. Sylvia Plath is a very famous poet, and she unfortunately died by suicide, but before her passing, she wrote a lot of poetry, especially from the perspective of a woman. You're going to label it exactly how I labeled it for the last poem. I'm going to show you how to do that, so don't freak out if you don't know how to do it. Make sure you're paying attention to the lines that repeat and the rhyme scheme. You do not need to use the color. So in the last slide, I use red and blue for the different lines just to show you where they repeat. You can do that if you want to. You don't have to if you don't want to. Okay. Labeling this maybe took me 6 or 7 minutes. It didn't take me very long. Okay, after you label the poem, you're going to answer questions about what you think the poem is about. Okay, so step 1, just read the poem, try to understand it. All right, if you want to answer the questions after you've read it, just because it's fresh in your brain, you can do that, and then you can label it, or you can read it, label it, answer the questions, or you can label it, read it, answer the questions, whichever. Okay, so here I'm going to show you exactly how I want you to label the poem. All right, here we go. I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so you have a better idea of what this is supposed to look like. Okay, so first of all, when I say first things first, what is a villanelle? That question is answered by the slides in the Google slide presentation. Okay, here is the copy of the example poem that I just read with the labels. Okay, and then down here, you are going to read this out loud. You don't have to read it out loud. You can also Google it and find someone reading it to you. That would be fine as well. I'm just going to show you how to label it. Okay, so here's how you label. You're going to go up here to this little thing that says line. Okay, you're going to click on that. And then you are going to draw a line under the first. Okay, and then you're going to click on it again. Every time you want to draw a line, you just have to click that line button up here. Okay, so I just drew a line under the first and third stanzas, or the first and third lines, because I know that those are the lines that are going to be repeating. So every time I see those lines, I'm going to underline them, okay? When you draw an arrow, if you want to draw an arrow, you go exactly the same where you find the line, click the down arrow, click arrow, and then draw a line. I can't remember which direction this is going to go. Oh, that's right. Okay, so you draw a line to the arrow, you draw a line to the line that, or you draw, okay. You draw an arrow to the line that you want to label, okay? And then you click text box, line 1, okay? You do the same thing, you go to arrow, text box, line 3, okay? And then as those lines repeat themselves throughout the poem, I just want you to underline and label them by underlining the line and then label it with the line number. Now, how you do rhyme scheme. You click text box and you're going to draw a text box down the side of your document. Okay? You're going to draw a text box all the way down to the bottom. And you're just going to label the rhyme scheme. So this, every first line of every poem is always going to be A. The second line, if it doesn't rhyme with the first line, is going to be B. And then you're just going to label all of those lines that rhyme with each other. So obviously dead and head rhyme. Red rhymes with dead and head, so I know that's A. Gallops in. I lift my lids and all is born again. So I know that rhymes with B, A. Okay, so that's how you're going to do that. Once you're done with that, I'm going to delete that. I gotta delete all this because it'll show up in your assignments. Okay, once you're done with that, you're going to come down here and you are going to answer a couple of these questions. What do you think this poem is about? What is the tone of the poem? Remember, tone is the author's attitude toward towards the content. So how do you think the author was feeling about the topic of the poem? And then who do you think is the you in the poem? She says, I think I made you up inside my head. Who do you think the you is? All right, and then you're done. I know this is a little bit more complicated than last week's assignment, but I think that if you label it and practice a little bit with it, you'll be fine. And you're going to talk more about this tomorrow too. So I am just a reminder, if you want to draw a text box to fill in the blanks here, you click text box, you draw one, and then you just type in your response. Okay. Same thing we did last week. All right. Let me stop this here. Once you're done with this, you just click turn it in and then you're done. Okay, well, I will see you tomorrow and good luck. If you have any questions, obviously feel free to reach out to me through email, through Jupiter message, through text message, however you want to reach out, and I will get back to you as quickly as I can. All right, I love you so much. I miss you a ton. You have no idea. And I will see you soon.